Hi, everybody. I'm Karen MacNeil, as you know, and I'm so excited about this video because I'm talking to two wine guys who are really promoting one of the world's great unsung varieties, and which you'll hear in a moment what that variety is. But I'm here with Peter Andrews of Culture Wine Company and Josh Hammerling of Hammerling Wines. And both of them are devoted, I'm sure, to a whole lot of wines, but in particular to Chenin Blanc. And so we're here to talk about Chenin and also, and a big festival they have coming up, and also about Share and Pair Sundays. I'm a co-founder of that initiative, and we're super excited to talk with these guys because one of the absolute strengths of Chenin is how fabulous it is with so many different kinds of food. So, hi, gentlemen.
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hi.
Really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So tell me, we have to answer the question first of all, like why Chenin? Why was Chenin Blanc something that both of you, just were galvanized by?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting with Peter and I is we actually met in the WSET program many, many years ago, like 8 years, I don't even know, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe. And so I think at that time we were doing so much tasting, and that was when I was really exposed first to how many different styles Chenin could be made in. It's like incredible that it could be pushed in this really steely mineral kind of like chiseled direction. It could be like oaked and more sort of with more breadth, or like off dry or sparkling or dessert wine. And there's so few grapes that can do that and do it well, and have proven that they can sort of thrive in these really distinct geographic regions. So I think that's kind of where it started. Is we were like, this grape's amazing. It can do so many things. Why not focus on the two regions that we are most closely associated with, California and South Africa, and showcase that to the world and to our community here locally in particular.
Obviously my whole world now is focusing on South African wine. And I think when I look at what's happening there in terms of this like major quality revolution, I think Chenin Blanc is one of the major drivers in that. And so I have this like dream where one day we can take South African Chenin and do comparative tastings like you would with the Côte d'Or or all of Burgundy. And I think you can do that with Chenin Blanc from South Africa. You could certainly do that from Chenin from around the world. But I think if we were to focus just on where I'm involved in most, is you could easily take from the Swartland to Stellenbosch, Franschhoek to Bot River and Elgin as just that. And they're all completely give you different characteristics. That's such a special, beautiful thing, but I don't think many sommeliers think about it that way, buyers in the retail world and even consumers. And so for us, we were kind of like talking about the beauty of Chenin Blanc. And then we're like, why don't we put this, let's put our money where our mouth is here. And like, let's bring a lot of these incredible producers here in California and South Africa together and let people, see for themselves.
I was sharing with you before we started that I was recently in South Africa, and I was just floored. I mean, I taste a lot of wine, but man, the Chenin Blancs from South Africa were just, they make you remember just how exquisite this variety can be. And there was a time when Chenin Blanc was the leading variety in California. So, Josh, do you feel like, talk to me, you think it can somehow climb its way back to its once great reputation in the US as well?
Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, so anecdotally, with all of our friends, like a lot of young winemakers have gravitated towards it. Like we said before, certainly around Lodi and around the Central Coast, there's so many really unique vineyards. And I think that vineyards, like grapes that can really shine with a distinctive way in a particular place, there's always going to be a place for that with young winemakers who are excited about it. And so we've seen a lot of people really championing it. And I think like particularly one of the ones that we're going to be pouring that's from the Rodnick Vineyard within the Chalone AVA and the new Gavilan Mountain AVA. That area has all this decomposed granite and limestone, and it's just, you can achieve this sort of like really steely mineral driven style of Chenin that's what I want to drink all the time. And what's really cool about it is you can kind of make it in a style that appeals to like maybe richer kind of browner Chardonnay drinkers and like Soms, or people who like, I only drink like Chablis or whatever it is. It just feels like it can go in a bunch of different directions. So I think that if we can continue, screaming from the mountaintop about it and bringing people out with really cool programming like we're going to be doing with Hella Chenin, I think we will continue to win people over and it has a bright future. I do think that the social aspect is important though, because it really helps to show people how it tastes with food. That's something that we've always emphasized with our business is really engaging the community and bringing out a bunch of chefs who are equally as ambitious as the winemakers to create this awesome food and then to have live music so that everyone feels really welcome and it just kind of feels like you're building a culture as much as you are crafting a product, which is I know what you guys are really passionate about too with all of your projects. So it's to me that seems like an important part of it.
Totally. I mean, it's, the creation of Share and Pair Sundays, which is happening for the first time this spring, but we'll also do Come Over October again this fall. And the whole premise really is a very simple one that we all know, which is that wine brings us together. And wine and food especially brings us together. It's always amazing to me, sort of psychologically, that when you ask someone, like, what was a real wine that really struck you, that you fell in love with, that sort of changed your life? The question that we sometimes both get asked and ask other people, people always remember who they were with. They remember the wine and they remember who they were with. And so that ability for wine to bring us together transcends age groups, transcends race, transcends socioeconomic status. It's just this most remarkable, almost soulful aspect of wine. So I'm glad you think of Hella Chenin and your movement as building a culture, because wine is a culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
100%.
too, like the group of winemakers from both hemispheres, it's pretty diverse in terms of the styles they're making and even the kind of history, like Chapelet, such a long standing history of making Chenin, but they may not be in that cool kid conversation right now. And so for us, it's like, let's kind of like break down that barrier and just bring in people who are like making good wine. So it's not someone's more natural than the other or more minimal intervention than the other. It's about like focusing on quality wine and good people. And I think that kind of helps make it easier for people to come in and want to be a part of it all, whether that's a consumer or someone in the trade. And I think that's a really important thing that will help just like the industry overall. Just get together and drink some wine. And like that's the whole point of what we're doing.
Of course, I completely agree, but one of the interesting things to me is I remember when I wrote the first wine Bible, which was a number of years ago, but I remember and at that time, South Africa actually was just emerging out of apartheid. And so it was a while ago, and South African wine was largely unknown in the United States. So if you knew Chenin, you knew it from the Loire. You knew it from Vouvray in particular. And actually, Vouvray at that time, Vouvray and Sancerre were the two leading white wines by the glass in New York City, which is where I'm from. And then, of course, Sancerre continues on, Vouvray disappears. But I remember talking to people about like, well, what about Vouvray? Why is it kind of, it's not keeping up with Sancerre here in how popular those two were once side by side in popularity. And people said to me over and over again in the Loire, it's because it can be made in so many different styles that people don't know what to expect. So it's interesting to hear both of you say, it can be made in a whole lot of different styles as a positive, because that was once thought of as its negative in a way, as its detriment.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I feel like maybe it's a generational shift or something for some of us who are younger. We just like it's like a sort of like Pokemon, like gotta catch them all kind of thing where we can't wait. You're always wanting to see some tiny variation or some tiny tweak. And certainly for me as a winemaker, I'm always so intrigued by that of like how something can be like either so different or different in these little subtle ways. It's funny you bring up Vouvray because that was actually my aha moment for Chenin. Actually, was I was visiting. We were visiting Domaine Huet, and we were tasting through a vertical of their sparkling wines, and it completely blew my mind because we were tasting through, and there'd be like the 2008 was just this like honey, like really all honeycomb, this like really incredibly rich sort of like unctuous style, and then some of them were more racy, and I was just like, I don't understand how this can be showing so differently. Some of them really savory, some of them really fresh, and yeah, maybe I'm not sure why the variety seems like so much more of an interesting thing, but from a brand recognition standpoint, like it's like New Zealand Sauv Blanc or something that's easy to sell and you know exactly how it's going to taste. Um, it makes sense that that would have been more successful, especially 20 years ago.
If it has changed, then, as you're both suggesting, that's a mark of goodness, right? It's a mark of a culture, our culture, American wine culture, becoming a little bit more savvy, realizing that differentiation is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in I think a lot of people want to celebrate diversity, right? And I think that that can absolutely be like the goal. And I think for us, that's what we're trying to do is celebrate the diversity in Chenin Blanc because it's incredibly diverse from still to sparkling, dry to sweet, you know, and everything in between. And I think that that's something that's so beautiful. But I also can completely empathize with the consumer in particular because, you know, wine is complicated. You know, we spend our whole lives being students of this beautiful product and it's still, you can never still know everything, right? And so as a consumer, it's like, how much time can you truly dedicate to understand? And so I think it's helpful also for us to guide through that and make those kind of purchasing decisions and break down those barriers, just make it easier to jump in and be a part of it.
See, but I'm gonna argue that it's specifically the not knowingness about wine that makes it all the more appealing. When I hear people say, you know, I want to demystify wine, I think, no, please don't. If you demystify it, it's
Keep
going
it
to be
mysterious.
vodka, right?
Yeah, I agree.
No, it is that. Oh God, who knew? Wow, this is really fascinating aspect of wine that is a head trip and keeps you, not you, but all of us,
Mm.
um, intrigued. That's its point of differentiation. Um, so I hope we don't explain, and I'm in the business of words and explaining. I'm hoping we don't explain too much. But you know, let's talk about, because we haven't yet talked about, we've talked about, you know, it has different styles, but let's talk about why there is an appeal to Chenin Blanc. I will tell you from my standpoint that there are two big assets. One is texture and weight, meaning that it's not as heavy as a lot of Chardonnay can be. We'll leave Chablis out for a moment. It's not as lean as, let's say, certainly not as lean as Mosel Riesling, but it has good weight and a really supple, fabulous texture. The second thing, though, is I would say it has this like sword of precision going through the middle of the wine. Like it's snappy and fresh. You always feel this great line of energy going through the wine. So I love it because of that. I think it makes it fascinating to drink with no food at all and totally fascinating, no matter if you're having a taco or, I don't know, some more elaborate kind of food. Sorry, tacos. I guess you could be elaborate.
I do love tacos. That's
Yeah, I just had a
There you
taco.
go.
You
Well,
want to
but
take that
why
as
do
the
you
winemaker
guys love
side?
it? How would you guys describe Shannon?
I think I would just
Flavors.
I would echo what you're saying and even even simplify it a tiny bit where like if you were just to take one style of wine in like the simplest terms, it's like light, acidic, like refreshing white wines is what I want to drink with every meal or in a hot situation where I'm like, it's like really hot or sitting on a porch, whatever it is, that's almost always going to be the right style of wine. And I know that's an oversimplification, but it generally does taste better with more types of food and is going to be a more satisfying wine experience as opposed to quite a few of like the red wines, regardless of how light they might be, it's still going to be a lot weightier and more intense. or fatiguing for your palate. And so as a producer, that's just something that I would be reaching for. If I just wanted, like, I just want a glass of wine, first thing that pops in my head is like light, acidic, like delicious, with enough texture to not feel boring or thin. And Chenin Blanc is that in so many instances. So that's like, I completely agree with you from a
Yeah.
production standpoint and from a consumer standpoint.
I think you hit the nail on the head at the very beginning by mentioning texture and weight, because that's one thing I talk about with South African Chenin, like every single time I get a chance to pour it for somebody, because I think you have so much sun there that you get just like this beautiful phenolic component to the wines. You have a lot of cooling impact from the Cape Doctor and those winds and these big diurnal shifts in some parts of the country. And so there's no fear of going through some natural malolactic conversion. And so those things tend to kind of turn into this beautiful velvety textured wine. But because there's so much acid inherently in the grape, especially when they're cropping at lower levels, you just get this like wonderful like core, like you mentioned, it just kind of cuts right through and just this mouth-watering acidity. And so I just feel like you can get the like weight and texture and even the spiciness that you might get from a Chardonnay. You get the acidity that is definitely much higher than Chardonnay. And I hate to keep comparing it to that one variety, but you also get this beautiful vehicle for terroir. So we were drinking Sandlands this morning. We were opening Josh's Chalone Chenin. We had Luddites from Bot River, and we also opened another from Stellenbosch. And it was like unbelievable to see
I think
how
I
the
have
grain.
that one. Is this
Yeah,
the Scions of
exactly.
Sinai? Where does that name come from? It's so Scions of Sinai. The Sinai
Yeah.
Peninsula is nowhere close.
So
Well, I
in
guess it's somewhat close, but
yeah, so Bernard, the owner and winemaker of that, is a seventh generation grape grower in the Stellenbosch region, but he's only a mile and a half from the waters of False Bay. So he actually was one of the main people who helped get the ward or the sub-appellation of the Helderberg delineated. And it's critical that that happened because they're so close to the water. You can have a 20-degree difference Fahrenheit during the growing season versus inland Stellenbosch. And so right across from the Helderberg Mountain is this little kind of crescent shaped slope, which is known as Sinai Hill. So he is a descendant of this hill. And he's been growing these like regenerative grapevines, these old bush vines. You can see on the bottle, there's an old certified heritage vineyard date on there. And that's a vineyard that his grandfather planted. And the beauty of it is it's like grown in this sandy granite soil. And so when you drink the wine, you get almost this salinity to it, but the yields are so low in those regenerative bush vines, and the work is so damn hard to do by hand that you just get this incredible concentration. And so it's just a wine that displays its place so beautifully. But meanwhile, that acidity is like keeps it refreshing, and you just kind of go back glass after glass. And I think that's the thing. It's not a palate fatiguing wine at all. And although it keeps you like endlessly curious. And I think that's what good Chenin Blanc does. And that's, I think, what we were like kind of all was hitting us this morning as we were opening these bottles for the shoot.
let me explain that bush vines are one of in fact, the oldest way of growing a grapevine. So it just looks like a rose bush. And some of the best old Chenin Blanc vineyards, not only in South Africa, but also in France and also in California, are these old bushes that are, it's a fabulous and the absolute traditional way to grow vines. And also I want to say, both of you mentioned the word acidic. And here's where, being a writer, you think about, what's the difference between a wine having a lot of acidity and acidic? Acidic is a word I would never use with consumers, because when I say acidic, I kind of mean not so good. Whereas lots of acidity means fresh and bright and lively and full of energy. There's so many words that we talk about in wine that are like that. And it's kind of like the word bitter too. Bitter good or bitter bad? Acidic good or acidic bad? So for everyone watching, we're talking about good acidity, freshness, liveliness, not sourness, which is sometimes a synonym for acidic, right? You guys are with me on that, right? Good acidity.
As a sparkling wine producer, I feel like I've become so immune to all we're drinking Glen all the time. So I just feel, I mean, whenever I say acid, it's a good thing. If it's, we always want there to be plenty of acid. Appreciate
And
the
here
note.
is Josh's sparkling wine, actually called Hammerling. Um, yeah, there's a long, long history, speaking of history, of Chenin Blanc being made into sparkling wine in France. Not so much in, well, I don't know, South Africa. It's mostly still Chenin, don't you think,
They
Peter?
do, yeah. You know, actually, surprisingly, the term in South Africa for traditional method sparkling wine is called Cap Classique, and
Classic.
it can come from any variety in any region. It just has to age 12 months on the lees in the bottle, and it has to be like whole cluster pressed. But crazy enough, something like 80% of the Cap Classique is coming from Chard and Pinot Noir, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but also Chenin Blanc and Pinotage, which is like wild. So there's a decent amount of Chenin sparkling, but I think you don't see it in the way what like Josh is focusing on, or even in the Loire Valley where you get like a Cremant that is entirely focused. It might be a blend with some other varieties.
Well, I do want to say that I can't wait for the festival. And, you know, we'll be there with you sharing and pairing because there's nothing better than food and wine together and being together, as we were talking about earlier. When is the festival? Where is it? Give us the scoop.
Yeah, so it's May 3rd, Saturday, May 3rd, at the winery here in West Berkeley, so 1350 Fifth Street. It's where, if any of you have been in the East Bay, we throw a First Friday block party, and it's a similar format where there's just tons of food, tons of good wine, and live jazz and oysters, all the fun stuff. So it'll be here, and it'll be open to the public from 1:30 to 5, around that, yeah, that window.
And how do people get tickets? What's the cost?
It's all online, HellaCheninWineFest.com. It's $50 for a ticket. That includes the full day of wine tasting. The seminar that has Bernard from Scions of Sinai and Tegan Pastelacqua from Stanlands, moderated by Alder Yarrow.
Alder Yarrow, my good friend. Yeah, good.
Yeah, Alder's amazing. And that is actually sold out, which is incredible. In only a week of releasing tickets, we've sold out of that. We will hopefully be able to get like another 10 or 15 more. But for those who acted fast, well done.
And if you'd like to get a ticket, you can email us at hello@hammerlingwines.co, and we'll put you on the wait list. We're hoping to release another 10. It just depends on how it plays out with some of the producers.
Yeah, but that's going to be like a very special part of it. And I think I was discussing with Bernard a little bit about it yesterday, and he was sharing with me an incredible stat that there are now a confirmed 18 variety or clones of Chenin Blanc that are now extinct in France and have been given back to France to be held in a nursery before they can be sold in that country. And
That's
so
great.
Some really, really interesting kind of heritage about Chenin Blanc to be discussed from both countries between Tegan and Bernard, who are both just like such incredible wealths of knowledge. So yeah, that into the tastings, it's just going to be, we couldn't be more excited for it. So yeah, thank you for sharing it.
And clones are genetic subtypes of a variety, and they often taste very different. So that's exciting, the idea that these genetic subtypes lived on in South Africa after they died out in France and can now be given back to France. That's super cool. And $50 is a steal. The wines, every one of these bottles probably they probably don't cost $50, but probably do deserve to cost $50. So that's great. And let me ask you lastly, the name Hella Chenin, it's like Hella Chenin, only Hella, if you're looking this festival up on Google. So where does the name Hella Chenin come from?
Craig Harmeyer has been the person who kind of has been like probably one of the, if not, probably the biggest champion of Chenin, I suppose, for the state of California. He makes like 7 or 8 different cuvées. And that has been a big project of his, of like kind of pulling people together, or like gathering people around that. And that was his rallying cry, was Hella Chenin, like along with Pascaline Lepelletier and a number of other sommeliers that were really well known. That just became, from my understanding of it, kind of became the like the social media hashtag, and then of course like branded hats and things that everybody was wearing to be like a cheerleader for the grape.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sure there's more
I think
history there.
I think too the term hella is such a Bay Area term, right? It's like this very like affectionate, like it's an enthusiastic way to express something, right? And I think that's exactly what we're going for, is just like Chenin is hella tasty, it's hella cool, it's hella diverse. And so we kind of brought that up and like, well, if that is even a remote possibility of a term, we have to call Craig, and it's A, allow him be cool with us using the term, and B, him being invited. And he said yes to Hella Chenin being used, and he was the first winemaker to say yes to coming to pour. So it's a big homage to him and the work he's done as well.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to try to be there. I'm really enjoying this Chenin Blanc right now, as you can tell. I know you've had a whole lot of Chenin already. So thanks for talking with us, though, and thanks also for allowing us to support Hella Chenin and for your support of Share and Pair Sundays. So thank you. See you at the festival.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you, Karen. Take care.
Absolutely. You too.